is not a motivational poster. It is an operating system. Our guest, Grace Okorie, walked away from a six-figure path, earned the legal toolkit, and built a firm that treats risk as non-negotiable for growth. She engineers solutions where immigration status meets property rights, then turns those solutions into closings, cash flow, and legacy. In a market crowded with noise, Grace optimizes for outcomes, not volume. Today, under iInvest Magazine's inaugural issue, Audacity, we connect the dots between visas and mortgages, between due process and deal certainty, between a mother's faith and a founder's playbook. If you want to convert mobility into equity, this is your masterclass. So, Grace Okorie, I want to say welcome to the first Legacy Diaries podcast with a guest. So, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining and being a part of the I Invest Magazine journey and family. And so I want to kind of get right into it. Let me explain to you a little bit, give you some context about Legacy Diaries podcast. It literally is um like this kind of it to memorialize the work that people are doing across the world, right?
Okay.
Particularly um with some affiliation in tier 2 and tier 3 markets. What does that mean? It just means that you are either doing work in emerging and frontier markets or you have some connection to emerging and frontier markets. I know that you're a Nigerian, and according to IFS Magazine's ranking, it's considered a tier 3B country because it's what we consider developing from an investor perspective. However, we all know that Nigeria is, it's developing in some ways, but a lot of ways it's a lot more progressive than some other countries. I was just having a conversation today about the mobile, like you can do so much more in an app with the bank accounts than we can in
Mhm.
the States. So many things you can do even with your cell phone, sharing minutes and transferring credits.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Things I just didn't know. I was like, we can't do this. Not we can transfer, but it takes like a week or more. You have to. It's like it's like an act of Congress to give somebody to transfer ownership, and it's like not even a big deal. So I think this is the reason for Legacy Diaries podcast. It really is a memorial to what people are doing so that if your children or family or friends are like, well, what did Grace do? This podcast can at least be somewhere in the memorial of what you've contributed to the world. And the purpose of it is to give insight and access to people in what I consider the mystery, like to unlock the mystery of what happens in some of these developing countries and frontier markets that people are just not aware of. And I
Yeah.
think it's important that we expose it in a way that is real in the sense of they're human stories. And then the second thing that I think is super important is that it is, people I think it has to dispel the myth of what happens, inside some of these
Exactly.
markets. Yeah. So that's why you're here. And so I want to kind of jump right into a few of the questions that I think are really important. We know from, in the intro, like your background is immigration law and how you've been able to build a law firm out of, really coming from a six-figure job, decided to take the leap into entrepreneurship and to move into this space where you're helping people literally change their lives, uproot from one place and move to another. In most cases, they are leaving their home country and coming to the US because you are a US licensed attorney. So, with that in mind,
Let's define what the responsible legal strategy is when you're talking about moving from one country to the next.
What the responsible legal strategy is, I mean, definitely is number one, you need to research the country that you're moving to, research the country to see what the options are. And we're talking immigration wise. So, whenever we're talking travel between countries, we're talking immigration. So, for example, certain countries have treaties, they might have treaties between two countries that would allow you to travel in a certain kind of way. In certain countries, you require to have a visa, and a visa is almost the basic requirement for traveling from one country to the other. So the visa is almost always required unless the country specifically states that because you are this, or because you are from this country, or because you possess this thing, the visa is either waived or qualifications are reduced, or, things like that. So I would say number one thing is definitely to do your research and your due diligence on how that country will receive you. And everyone is different based on your background, based on the country you're coming from, based on the country you're going to, and even sometimes, based on the family that you have there. So, for example, sometimes I will have clients who are like, hey, I want to come to the United States and, I want to be legal and work. And I'm like, okay, it's not that easy. It's not just a decision. I'm just going to go. And then, yeah, they'll open the door and let me in. We need to kind of almost unwrap the different layers to see what you could qualify for. So, and this is where we would do a consultation. Okay, let's talk about this. You want to move. Do you have family here? Generally, come in, and we're talking about, when we're talking, or based on your question, I'm taking that to mean you're planning to come live in that country, move to that country as your new residence, correct?
That's correct.
So based on that, it would be okay. How do we, for example, if a client is coming to the US, okay, we need to talk to see what kind of family you have here. And I've actually had people who were like, they were born in the US, but they were a baby and their parents, they traveled, their parents passed away. So sometimes based on, the consultation, we kind of figure out what we need to figure out. I mean, we've had one, we had to hunt down his birth certificate, go to the hospital, find it, because unfortunately the parents were no longer around. He had extended family who had really no ties to the US and didn't really, couldn't help him with that. So now it's just, okay, I know they told me I was born in this hospital, this time, blah, blah. And now we're like, oh, voila, look, you're a US citizen, because they didn't, do all of that at the time of the birth, which is important, the registration of birth. And that's another whole process. So just quickly, I guess, in short, to answer your question, do the research and also understand that every situation is different. So just because someone was able to accomplish this way does not necessarily mean that would be the best way that works for you.
Often do you get questions from investors who are looking to enter the market but want to leverage immigration? And when I say how often, like when I guess the question would be more around like how do investors, when they are approaching you, what questions do they ask when it comes time for them to kind of become legally able to, one, do business in this country, two, what the immigration options are?
So I mean, most of the times for investors, the ones that know what they want are like, okay, I'm strictly coming there for investors. They do know that in the US, there are pathways for people who want to come in through the investment route. And that's the EB-5 visa. And pretty much there are requirements to that investment wise. And again, the US is different. I like to, because we're on a global forum here, you have to understand that each country has their different pathways, spelled out for investment purposes. And I always like to explain to people, some countries are like, come in here, buy a property. It needs to be this amount. You need to do this. We'll give you a permanent residence card, which is a pathway to citizenship. Some countries come to us, give us this amount of money, leave it for this amount, or, da 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 da, we'll give you this. So again, this is part of that research to know what that country requires, and also know that it changes. So just because, again, somebody went to, this country last year and did it this way, you also need to do your research for your current situation and your current time as well. Back to the United States, we do have the EB-5 pathway, and that's generally the main investment route for investors. And the requirement is really they come in here, they have to invest in create a business. And I'll just keep it general without doing a whole lecture, but it's essentially you're creating the business. You need to show that you establish these number of jobs and blah, blah, blah. So there's a business part of it. You set that up. And then once you set that up, then we would say, okay, you know what? You've met that criteria. And based on those criteria, now we can file an immigration petition to get you that EB-5 visa based on this investment. So a lot of times investors, they have, and there are two ways with the investment route. Some people can create their own investments, create the business. And sometimes the government already has areas designated saying, hey, if you invest in these areas, we have already checked this out and these areas qualify to get you this EB-5 visa. So that's usually how investment in the US works. But like I said, in other countries, there are so many different other pathways investment wise.
So let me ask you this question around immigration and real estate for the US in particular. Let's say that business owner in Estonia, which is in Eastern Europe, wants to come to the US and purchase a property so that they can kind of, not just kind of, but expand their portfolio to have a US anchor. Um, and they get a chance to do that by, they call you because you're also in real estate. They call you and say, I need a lawyer to represent me in my transaction internationally. And so where does their current immigration status, the title process and financing, if that's their option, where do they intersect?
So I guess if I understand correctly, the question is how did they navigate like title and financing based on the fact that they're not US residents.
They're not US citizens, yes.
Not US citizens, not US residents as well. So you can purchase. So this is the thing. And of course, I think we talked earlier. Another part of my practice is real estate transactions. I do have clients from all over the world. I've represented people from Nigeria who bought property here, from Australia. I have a client in Australia. He buys a lot here. There are a lot of Chinese citizens as well who buy properties. Now, real estate itself, a lot of times, real estate really, especially in the US. So real estate is not a direct pathway to immigration status in the US. Okay. Now, if you use real estate as that, then you have to go through that EB-5, which means you have to invest in certain level of real estate. You have to meet the financial, create the jobs and all. So, but just purchasing real estate alone is not a direct pathway to immigration status in the US. Now, that being said, though, there are a lot of foreigners who own property and real estate. Who own real estate in the United States without even being physically present here. And some of them have actually never been in the US, but they do own these properties. So title wise, the best way, I advise these clients is usually they set up an LLC, because an LLC is usually, it's like you're creating a legal entity in that country. So the LLC is their person who is now from the LLC, we can get the EIN number. And the EIN number, in a way, is kind of like, the social security number a human person can have. So with that, we can always purchase a property, put it in the name of the LLC, of course. And, there are things about how we set up the LLC, the agency requirements, the address, all of those things can be done. And we can, I'm the agent for them and we'll work out their LLC structure for them to purchase a property. Now, with the financing, generally, it is a challenge to get financing. So most international investors are coming in with cash. They're coming in with cash and they're purchasing. Usually the first properties, it's cash. Now, sometimes, they'll partner with people and they'll, like have someone who's here and that person gets the finance and it's under the LLC and they can operate it like that. But generally too, there's also a product like I think the ones we've seen a lot more lately is the DSCR loan, which is a debt service something ratio. But the DSCR loan, that's a common one I've seen a lot lately that investors use. And literally the whole purpose of the loan is you get the loan based on the rentable income of the property. So now it's not based on your financial assets. It's literally saying, hey, I'm buying this 2 units. Look at the market, or sometimes it already has a tenant in it. So based on, the market or the rent analysis, you can get at least $2,000 rent from unit 1, 2,000 from unit 4. That covers more than what, the mortgage would be. So give me a loan for that. And generally investors, get those DSCR loans. Rates are a little higher, than the normal conventional loans, but there's always a way to work it out. And then also on the other side too, when they're planning to sell the properties or they want to purchase another one, a lot of times I'm able to serve as their power of attorney, and they just sign out over the power of attorney to me, and I can do all the signatures and all the transactions on their behalf, even while they're out of the country.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's super important that people know that just because you live in a, a different country, and even, what we're considering tier 2 or tier 3 emerging and frontier country, you can stabilize and hedge your investment portfolio by purchasing in, a stronger market. Let's say the US, but then there's also Singapore, then there's also Australia, there's also, New Zealand. So there's all these other areas where you can stabilize up against all of the volatility in some cases of other markets. Now, let me ask you a question in terms of what are the processing times? Like, how fast does this happen? What is the time from I want to purchase to the close of the sale, and, virtual keys are passed along in a sense, right?
It depends. So it really is number one, how quickly do you have the cash? Now, I've had deals where a contract comes to me and they're like, yeah, we want to close this in 3 days because I have the money. So the closing itself, the main thing that holds up a closing really is, I guess, without the due diligence part, is really the money, or getting the money over to the other side. However, whenever I'm involved, I always tell people or my clients to just pull your brakes, okay? Because I don't like to rush to do nonsense. That's one of my, even immigration, I would rather sit with it, dot my I's, cross my T's and make sure everything is good. Because one of the most important things, and we are blessed in the United States that I would say we have at least one of the most sophisticated title systems in the world, where you can literally do a track search and see all of the liens that are on the property. So you can see if there's a tax owed, if there's water bill owed, if there was a roofer that was not paid, that file a lien on the property. And essentially, a lien on the property means you owe me money. I'm filing it on this property. If you ever sell this property, you have to pay me. Otherwise, this debt will stay on this house. But that means is basically, if I, as a buyer, wants to buy that property and I see a lien on there, I'm not going to buy it. You have to take care of that. So usually and this is on the buyer side, this is where I come in saying, hey, let's do a track search. So let's run the title first to see all of the issues on the title. Sometimes we want to see, are there violations on the building? We want to see if there's a court case, pull the documents, see what's on there. Now, that's essentially what would delay it. And for me, I would intentionally delay because I never advise clients to rush in and buy something. For example, today I actually just had a conversation with a client who purchased a property and, was telling me, we pulled the title. Now, if she purchased a property, we're trying to sell the property now, pull the title, and there are all these issues. And he's going, well, no, I did a closing and this was done. First of all, I was like, wait, I did not represent you when you bought that. I was not the lawyer. So, but, and I was like, yeah, just because the property changed hands does not mean that every issue, it doesn't mean that you got clean title. And that's the misconception. A lot of times people feel like I closed, a title company was there, these parties were, it doesn't mean just because you own the property does not mean that everything that was on the property was addressed. And that's where your lawyer will come in, an experienced real estate lawyer will come in and say, okay, I've literally had closings where I will, tell my clients, we're not doing this because I think the most recent one was there was a document recorded. Pretty much my client wanted to use a property for something, But one of the things he wanted to do was to tear down something. But there was a document recorded about that thing he wanted to tear down. And we didn't know what the document said. So does it say you can never tear that down? You have to build it, what you have to do. And they were like, oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. Let's close. We'll get no. Because if he's not able to do what he wants to do, then that land is useless to him. And it just seems very obvious they were trying to rush to sell it. So it's usually when people are rushing to do things, I tell my clients, like, just slow down, do your due diligence, or you can end up with the worst headache of your life. And, just like the client who did the purchase and now we're selling, finding out all the issue, like we literally have to go back to court now to file, asks the inspector to come. There's so many violations on the property. It's crazy. So to answer your questions, a real estate transaction can move really, really fast, but I don't advise to rush things. Now, if it's in a deal where there's financing involved, which means we're getting the money from the lender, then this is usually like we're looking about sometimes. I mean, I've seen some close out in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but generally about 30, 45 days, because this is, the bank is doing their due diligence at this point. Not only their due diligence on the property, but also their due diligence on the individual, making sure, your finances, everything you're telling us is true, your income, your debt, it's all correct. Okay, you're good. Your financial profile is good. We think you can give us the money. So now let's look at the property. Just in case you don't give us the money, we need to make sure that this property, is it appraised for the amount that we're giving it to you? Do you have the property insurance to cover it? Do, the taxes okay? So all of those process kind of, takes it to about that 30 to 45-day window for closing whenever there's a finance deal. But generally on a cash deal, you can close as quickly as you want to. But my advice is never to rush to a closing table. Always make sure you have someone look at everything and make sure they are addressed and you have proof that it's been, you know, recorded, addressed, and all of that.
Yeah. So let me ask you, let me switch gears a bit. So if you were advising Nigerian government on creating a mortgage system for buyers in Nigeria, local to Nigeria, being a Nigerian immigrant, you're familiar with the government system, you're familiar with, the fact that the mortgage system is not robust.
Yeah.
Where would you advise first if you were giving, just based on what you know at this point about what happens, at the mortgage level? Let me give you some context. What I know
Okay.
today, tomorrow it could be something else now. But today, what I know is that, you're looking at 27 to 33% interest rates, right? You're looking at like their due diligence process is typically connected to the company, right? And the audited books of the company, and
Mm.
typically less on the person's personal finance, but they do evaluate significantly the person's community reputation. So I wonder, like, because you said something earlier and you said the United States has one of the most robust kind of due
Titles.
diligence process and title search processes in the world. And I'm asking if you were advising the Nigerian federal government to help drive policy around due diligence for title, mortgage, and financing. And, even in terms of adding value to their citizenship by investment program, where would you start?
I will
Yeah.
start by praying for Nigeria. No, I think when it comes to real estate in Nigeria, and I do understand the mortgage system. It's a high risk. And you also have to understand, I think, where we're coming from, Nigeria as well. Nigeria just recently introduced the BVN, the NIN. Oh, before then, there was really no social security. That's similar to the US social security system. So in the US here, we have the social security system where once a person is born, you're automatically assigned this number, which is I can find you anywhere you go based on this number. So that in itself creates a certain kind of security for whoever is giving you a loan, because they know that everything you do is linked to that number and I can find you, I can track you down, I can see you there. Nigeria just introduced that. And I'm sure even with that, not everybody has one still. Say that again.
No, they can find you. Most people especially people who have registered for their international passport. They link.
Oh yeah, for people
So
coming
so
in,
you're
that's
no, 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 I'm not
no,
talking about people coming, I'm talking about people here in
who
Nigeria.
have registered. Yeah,
Yes, who have a registered international passport. They if they wanna find you, they will find you.
they will.
That
Okay,
first. So they
okay,
link your NIN to your international passport. So they're in the
perfect.
BVN, and now
So they've
looking
started
at
link.
they're starting like, for instance, when you go to get your bank account, you've gotta have both the BVN and the NIN. So I guess it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like a catch-22, and then your like, whatever your ID number is, like, if it's a state card or if it's a driver's license or if it's your international passport, meaning your Nigerian passport, all of those
It's
numbers are
also
now
linked
starting
there.
to sync. Yeah, they're starting to sync.
Okay. And I think and that's really I mean that's really what I believe will give more security on the finances side. Now, I believe that even before we get to the money part though, we need to work on the title system. The
Yeah.
title system, that system where I can literally go into a computer and see the chain of title on this property. And the chain of title is literally who owned this, who transferred it to this person, who transferred it to that person that transferred it to this person. And that's the chain of title to see that this person that I'm buying this property from actually owns the property, actually has a right to transfer the property. And additionally, any other issue that's on this property, I can find it out, I can look it up because that will create an assurance for even the mortgage companies. Because I'm sure the hesitation is like, hey, if something crazy happens to this property and now we have a dispute, at least we can come get your money from you. But if there was an assurance that this title of this property is clean, that even if you don't pay, just like the foreclosure process happens here where the property, I mean, we gave you a loan to buy a property for $500,000. You pay the loan and it's down to $400,000. Now you ghost us or you stop paying. We're going to get this property back because the property is collateral for the loan. And generally, the way real estate works, the value most always will appreciate. So at the end of the day, between the insurance and everything else, the banks end up making their money back and more. And a lot of times they say other people, they sell the debt over and over. There's so many people make money from it. So I think number one, what we need to work in Nigeria is to clean up the title issue. If we clean up the title issue where people are able to confidently come in and say, I can look up and I can say for a fact, backed by the government that this property is owned by this person and I can confidently give that person my money, take this property is mine, everything else will flow, like once we have the confidence in that part in the chain of title on the property, I think everything else will flow because you will even have their international investors willing to come in to say, okay, you know what, I will come, provide the mortgage. Because even a lot of times here, that DSCR loan that I talk about, most of them are not even the bank. Most of these things are private individuals that are saying, hey, look, we're all going to come together. We pull this money. If we see people who want to buy a place, we'll check out the property. The property is good. We'll give them
Mhm.
the loan to buy the property because it's a win-win. If they don't pay, we still have the value, we still have our money locked up in real estate, which we can always sell and get back. But even before then, we've already made all this money in interest payment that they paid. So it's a win-win. And I think the main thing is really the title and the confidence in the title system and and the properties, and that would drive everything else.
So I think what you said is true to a degree. I just wonder how that impacts like generational land because it's unregistered. You know what I mean? Like the cultural piece plays a huge role in I think how formalized systems that look like the US are kind of set up. I was just curious, like what would you advise if you were sharing that type of information with people who make decisions at the federal level? Because in all honesty, they've started with the identification numbers, and then even with title registration, I mean, Lagos is a little bit more like kind of on it.
Of course.
I can't speak to every state in Nigeria. Obviously Nigeria is huge, but I would say like other states are starting to follow through by going through like having like a GIS system. But the
Hmm.
problem is it's not searchable. Like you still got to physically go in and be present to search. And so if it were me, I think, if I was asking myself this question, because I think that's a great question to ask, not even just for Nigeria, but just across these different markets that don't have these robust title programs or solutions in place. I think the first thing would be, more than anything, just at the data level, just gather the information and
But that's
centralize.
that's 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 what the title system is. That's what I mean
Yeah.
by the title system. So I don't have to go to an office to search or whatever. It's all in a database. I can go in there, pull a title search, and of course, it won't be a database that's open to everyone. So that's essentially what the title system is. It's the data and all the information and all the documentation, everything that was recorded on the property. So everything, every ownership, any beneficiary, if someone has a life estate, whatever it is you have, any claim you purport to have on that property has to be recorded and has to be in that database for it to hold water. So that's the title system. What you're saying
Yeah.
exactly, that database is a title system.
Yeah.
There's no, you can't go and dig into, like start searching folders of cabinets and drawers and things like that. No. If it's not in that system, then it doesn't exist. So
It's
that's
interesting
essentially,
because they're starting from, like, I would say maybe at most 10 years back, where the system is a little bit more organized. You know what I mean? Like, where you're not searching through like a room with God knows what is in it. You know what I mean? In the room with these files that are just
you shouldn't
old.
even have to search in a room. You should not have to search in a room.
Well,
I mean, and then
I don't have a problem with the, because let's be clear, like, our libraries were filled with, documents where we had to
but
start.
this
Even the Library
this
of Congress is still that way. But what
no,
I'm
it's
saying is,
2025. It's
no,
2025.
what I'm saying
I
is,
mean,
that part is still there. Like, we still have those kind of older systems. I'm just saying, organize it. You know what I mean? Like, just,
okay, thank you. That part I was gonna say. So the
yeah.
part about searching in the library, that was like, okay, I'm not judging Nigeria through the lens of America. When I went to law school, we had the books, we had the library, we have now I don't have any law books because everything is online.
Yes,
But
digital. Yeah.
to make that shift, it requires, yes, it requires the resources, the manpower, the time, but it
Yeah.
has to be a dedicated effort. Because I would tell you, even the court system here in America, I mean, we're in America and everything, but even the court system back, and I've been practicing for what, 15 years now. But I can remember when I started practicing and I would go to the clerk's office, we couldn't find the cases online. You have to go to the clerk's office and give them the case number, and they will go to the back and find the box to find, the row, find the box and get you the file. So it was, I don't remember, I think the last secretary of the clerk of the court that came in, that was her campaign. That was her mission. She said, okay, you know what? I'm going to make sure that everything is, everything is scanned and it's all available electronically. So they set a goal. I mean, we can't do everything all at once. So we're
No.
going back 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And even now, I think maybe if you were looking for something 25 years back, those are probably still in boxes. But it's just been a gradual process where everything is available on the cloud, like it's not, because paper can burn, paper can,
No,
disappear,
it's high
paper
risk.
can,
I get that. Yeah, yeah. I just think that, because
yeah,
think about it, when we were coming up, like, well, for me, when I was coming up, we started off with paper, then they went to microfiche, which was like those film, you know what I mean? And then they went to, kind of this campaign where you were still, it was still, I remember I had a job where where we were scanning papers
was,
in, right? And then they created an additional sophisticated system where they can take all that scanned paper and then pick the data up from the paper, turn it into,
yep,
kind of the data
the
that
record.
required, and they mapped it into records. Yeah. So I just was curious, like, if you were advising a government, in one of these markets, what that would look like. So let's take a switch really quick and talk a little bit about your personal story. And, like, I would say you left a comfortable job, right? You left a comfortable six-figure plus job, and at some point, during this entrepreneur journey, it's never far from us that we're like, we need to go back to work. At what point do you just chalk logic and just drive? What is it that reminds you how to stay committed to the journey?
What do you mean, on leaving the job or my, wait,
No, I'll stay
clarify that, 'cause
committed to your current journey. your current journey, your what you do now. At what point do you say, I could go back into the workforce. I could go back and get a job. I could do this. I could do that. But I'm here now and I'm going to stay committed to this. What is it
Oh
that
no,
keeps you committed?
I know I would get fired in a heartbeat. I can't work for anyone else. I've done this long enough where I know I can't work for it because I know I think differently. I like to do my things differently. I did work in corporate for a while. You know, I worked in corporate. I saw how it works, and it's corporate. You have to sometimes just not say what you want to say, and all of that. In terms of, thinking there's no plan B. I'll put it that way for me. It's like, this is what I do. This is what I love. It was very, very scary doing it, jumping into it because, of course, you're jumping into the unknown. But for me, it was definitely the best decision ever because it's just allowed me the freedom and, just afforded me the life that I want to live. So going back to the workforce is definitely not an option. Pushes me every day, my bills and my children, of course, and the trips I want to take and traveling. And yeah, those are my whys. But it's a journey I love. I'm loving it.
Yeah, 3 boys at home, right? High stake
Yep.
cases at work. What systems do you use to protect your ability to be present with them and your performance in the company?
Oof. I don't want to say this is a system because I don't want to. I don't think I have it all figured out. I think it's just a day by day thing where it's more like, and even at work, sometimes some weeks are crazier than the others. So I won't disregard that and say that okay, some weeks I might have to be like, hey boys, mommy has to do this, so this is focus time, especially when I'm working, I have immigration cases or deadlines. These are people's lives and things like that. I need to do what I have to do. But for me, it's just making sure I am not dropping the glass balls, if that makes sense. So my goal is definitely to be present with them. And then, of course, my goal is also to be present with my clients as well, to make sure that once I take in your case, I'm definitely not, nothing. I will not do anything that would jeopardize your case or whatever. So I'm present at both when I need to be and just balance it. And I think one of the systems that I would say I intentionally put in place was the boundaries of my time. So I'm saying, okay, as a lawyer, I'm available to clients 9 to 5. After 5 o'clock, I'm not available anymore. Now, does that mean I don't work after 5 o'clock? No, because most times I'm working at nighttime. Sometimes when the kids go to bed, I have to do work if there's work that needs to be done or if I have court or hearing or something the next day. But that boundary allows me to say, okay, you know what? This is a window. Weekends, I don't have weekend. I don't do work weekends unless we have something due on Monday or something that needs to be done. So I think that boundary with my time and saying, okay, this is, lawyer mode done. Now I'm shifting to mommy mode. And even when I'm in the mommy mode, if I have to do work, I try to keep it outside of that zone. So, hey, I'm with the kids right now. Maybe, when they go to bed, if it's something that we had to talk about and, something, we can schedule that for 9 o'clock after they go to bed and get that done as well. So
Yeah,
that's
so
how it.
you try to guard your time as much as you possibly can, and I totally get that, especially, you know, raising young people who need time themselves. Yeah.
Yep. You know,
I have 2 more questions that I wanna ask that are kind of in the investor space, and that is what people may or may not know is that you also do estate planning, and so what would be kind of the estate planning, I would say, stack for an international investor? If you were like, for instance, if you are coming from, like I said, let's say Eastern Europe or South America. No, let's say Central America, closer, like Panama treaty, they have all the things in place. What would be the best way to protect their asset in the States, but they're not a United States citizen? Do you have an idea about that?
wait, so someone from
They're
Europe
from
trying to,
Panama
uh huh.
or South America or
Okay.
outside of the US. They're not a US citizen.
Hmm.
And they want to protect the asset that they purchased, the real estate asset they purchased in the States. what would be your suggestion for them to do the asset protection?
So I guess my follow-up question to that is, what are they protecting it from, or what are they trying to protect it from?
Right. So there's two things. One, it would be a matter of inheritance, right? Who gets it when they're gone.
Okay.
And then the second thing would be, depending on what the taxes are in said country,
Right.
how do they, kind of protect it so that they're not incurring additional expenses? Because one thing for certain, in the US, you're gonna have a tax, right?
I was
So
gonna say, yeah.
right. So how do you hedge against 2 systems with taxes that are a part of their
A lot
process?
of times, though, so estate planning is really, there are different reasons for estate planning. A lot of, estate planning could be, I just want to make sure that all my stuff is in one basket and everything goes to, who it needs to go to. Sometimes estate planning is, I want to, hide my stuff here so nobody sees it, but also pass it along. So there are a lot of different reasons why people do estate planning, but I think the overarching reason is really, I want to make sure that my things are, passed on the way I want them when I'm gone, or generally that's the general reason. So basically, I guess in that scenario, someone who is from Europe having a property here, they still have to pay taxes on the property. I mean, they still would have to pay the property taxes. They still would have to pay for, any capital gains at the time they sold the property. So that is a US requirement. Now, with their tax, protecting it from tax from where their country is, that's kind of because pretty much, like, for example, US citizens and stuff that they acquire overseas, the US still wants you to pay taxes. There are ways to shelter that. So here as well, they can put it in an LLC. There's a Wyoming LLC, and I'll be, transparent. I don't do those sophisticated estate planning with the LLCs and all that. But the bottom line is, most of the time, if somebody wants to get to it, they can always get to it. Just FYI. And I know people, tout it as that. With protection for them, generally, the main thing you have to understand too is, generally, when it comes to real estate properties, the country that the property is situated, the state the property is situated, the laws of that place usually controls that property. So for example, if someone has, if you have a property here in even Illinois, and then you have another property in Michigan, which is another state in the United States here, you can't have a will there that, will tell Illinois what to do with this property. So that will, if they had to go to court and go have a, probate a will in Michigan, they have to come and record that will here in the Illinois courts, so that the courts here will say, okay, this is what you can do, or, authorize them to do what with the property. So that's something to keep in mind, especially when it comes to real estate. Whatever plan you have in your country, you can have it recorded here where the property is located. But I would say in this situation, I'm kind of a little weary to give like a general knowledge. I mean, general advice. I would, this is where I'd say it all depends on individual situations, what we're trying to
For
accomplish.
sure.
This is
For
what
sure.
would work
And
best. Yeah.
and that they should book a consultation if that's what they need to know. Let's just move out of that space and into like a quick fire uh closing question. Favorite city right now for international property buy-in and why? Come on, come on, come on. Quick, quick, quick.
For me, I just want a city by the water. That's a city by the water with no winter. I have not. I won't discriminate against. I'm open at this point because I've tried a few and they're kind of disappointing me right now. So
One book that sharpened your decision making under uncertainty.
wait, say that again.
One book that sharpened your decision making under uncertainty. You were uncertain during a different period of your life, and a book that helped you become strong in decision.
Okay, I know the book, but I can't remember the book. It's like, I think
You
it's
read a
it's
lot of
called
books,
How
so how can you
I
not
I
know?
you I no I do read a lot. Wait, let me see. Is it
Is it that book about subscription?
oversubscribed? That one was, I don't think it's here, but I want to say it's a book. It was How Successful People Think or something like that.
And that's the one that sharpened your decision making.
I think so, because it was, I believe, I mean, I think I've gotten a variation of it from all the books, but that was just, it was more of just stop with the analysis paralysis and just do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
And, be okay, or just trust trust your thinking.
So let me ask this
I'll
question.
go with that.
Most underrated Midwest submarket for cash on cash returns.
Most underrated
Midwest.
in the U.S. market in real estate.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's not
I'll
cash
say
on cash.
Chicago.
Nah.